There we go. All right. So we talked about his painting. We talked about him. We talked about a lot of stuff he did. One of the main themes is westernization, which is, can someone kind of explain what westernization is? Yeah.
It's trying to make a country more like Europe and Western countries.
Yeah. Guys, that's something that you're going to have to really get as we look at different civilizations, West versus East, in terms of thinking, dress, philosophy. And so, like, when we say the West, we're talking about sort of like this European style of doing things, whereas the East refers to the Asiatic styles, which again is pretty diverse depending on where you are, but there's certain philosophies that are kind of thematic throughout. So, yeah, absolutely. What was something that Peter tried to change? What was the thing he tried to make everybody do that was kind of more European that they weren't normally doing? So, yeah. Yeah, don't wear beards. That's not cool. What's another thing he tried to change? I guess someone else has changed it. I'll come back to it. No one else. Somebody, anybody over here? Somebody want to? Yeah.
More like a warm water port.
Yeah, that's not really. He did. That's true. But it's not really answering my question. But yeah, you're right. Yes, ma'am. Clothing. Yeah, that's another thing he tried to change. What else? What about like activities? Was there anything like you tried to get them to do that maybe they want to? Yeah. Yeah. Bring them out to socialize, things like that. All these is kind of a European thing, not so much an Asiatic thing. Now, as you pointed out a second ago, absolutely, he wanted a warm water port. So where was he going to try to get that from? Who was he going to try to take a warm water port from? No. Did he succeed? No. So where did he get a warm water port from? Yes, ma'am. Sweden, sure. And what did he do with that land he got? Go ahead. Yeah, St. Petersburg, you go up there. How would you describe St. Petersburg? Somebody, anybody? Sorry? Like, what kind of city was it? Like, how was it built? Like, yeah. All right. Wild guess, anybody? Was it made of ham? Was it made of ham? It's made turkey, yeah. Only barbarians can make a steak. Honey roasted, oven roasted, mesquite. It was European, for one thing. It was a European-style city, but what did that mean? Well, architecturally speaking, he took all these different movements from the European sector and sort of adopted them. For instance, if you looked at a picture of his summer palace, and it looked very reminiscent of Versailles. So again, he's taking his things from Europe, but at the same token, there's elements of Asiatic architecture as well, like the onion dome, shapes like that. You guys ever play Tetris?
Yeah.
I do Tetris, right? You know, like there's that building that's kind of a symbol of Tetris. It's almost always in all the games. I'm talking about. It's got the domes at the top of it. It's really kind of like a candy coated looking structure. Yes, I am. That building. Oh, Father. That building. Does that look familiar? Or that, it does, doesn't it? That's St. Basil's Cathedral. It's in Moscow. Or no, it's not. That's a lie. That is in, I think it is actually in Moscow. That is very much reminiscent of Eastern style in terms of its architecture. The onion domes, the way the arches are constructed, all that. That's classic Russian construction. So it's got elements kind of similar to this, but at the same time, it's also very different because it was sort of this westernized idea and trying to make something that is, fancy. Don't do that. Goodness. Hydrovision suddenly. So anyways, back to it. But yeah, he did all these different things to try to update what he saw as the backwards ways of the Russian people. That's the building we were talking about a second ago. So he did a lot of changes, some for good, some not so good. For instance, despite the fact it was dead throughout most of Europe, what did he come to very much rely upon in Russia? Despite this being dead in most of Europe, what did he make happen even more so in Russia? He strengthened this in Russia. I'll let you guys ponder for a second. The question is, despite this thing being dead in most of Europe, Peter increased Russia's reliance on this thing, which is weird because it's not Western. Yeah. Yes, specifically serfdom, reliance on serfs. So, in ways he was good, in ways not. Now, Catherine, she's going to be an interesting chick. You see, she was something that the people in Russia really, really desired. And that's to stay a strong leader. If you look at Russia after Peter, everything is falling apart. Peter spent so much time as an autocrat, he never trusted a bureaucracy to run the country well. The problem with that is even though he could do a better job in a bureaucracy, whenever he died, there's no one there to take up the reins, so to speak. So basically, Russia is going to be in a fit as different rulers try to take over, are assassinated, are taking different positions back and forth, until finally, someone is able to take control. And, we might be asking, why is it that Catherine, who has no real ties to the throne, is able to so overwhelmingly convince people to follow her? Partially it's her own personal charisma. Partially it's they wanted someone who was a strong leader. And so whenever she does successfully take over the country and is able to do so in a way that is decisive, they're kind of receptive to that. Catherine is initially a German princess that was able to, through an arranged marriage to Peter, become Tsaress. However, Peter was assassinated by his own military officers, and she kept the throne. Now, what's weird about this is she immediately got support of the same people who killed her husband. Like they killed her husband, and then bam, they were followers. So odds are very strong that she had something to do with the death of Peter, whether it be directly ordering his death or something a little bit more, how shall we say, indirect. Nevertheless, she is able to take the throne, she's going to rule it, and she does so as an autocrat. However, you'll notice that the dates we're talking about here, right at this point, Peter's death is in 1725. When we're talking about Catherine, we're talking about the 1760s, 1770s, so basically fully 50 years after the fact. And by this point, we've entered a time period called the Enlightenment. And we're going to spend a great deal of time going over this in the next chapter. But the Enlightenment is our next major period of change, sort of like the Renaissance was. The difference, though, is the Enlightenment is all new in terms of how it looks at humanity, how it looks at philosophy, all these different types of things. It's the birth of the modern, semi-modern scientific age. It's also a time when people start questioning the types of government in place. Why should one person have all the power? That's not fair. It's non-representative. It's not a good system because it only represents one person's viewpoint. We together our viewpoints. And this is the birth of democracy. And so what happens is, in some cases, you have revolution, where democratic systems are put in place. In other cases, you have the adaptation of democratic ideals from within a monarchy, i.e. limited monarchy, which is going to happen in Great Britain. Other cases, you have autocrats like Catherine, who ostensibly have enlightened principles and call themselves enlightened despots. But in truth, they don't really follow much of what the Enlightenment actually said. It's sort of like this. What would be a better system of government? A democracy where everybody's viewpoints are shown, or a benevolent despotism where there's one infallible person who is able to control everything perfectly? Let's take it one step further. Let's say that it's a government that's not even a person. It's a machine or some magical being or something, whatever, that makes the right decision every single time. What's the better system? Yeah, obviously, because it never makes mistakes. But is that really possible? No, not really. So we go with what the best thing we have. Democracy isn't perfect. No one should claim that it is. It's got its flaws, just like any other system of government. But from what we've seen so far, it's the best we have to work with. You know what I mean? I mean, it's slow. Democracy is stupid slow to change. You know what I mean? It's telling whenever you can see a law that a vast majority, like 75% of the population in a country disagrees with, and yet it's still on the books. You know what I mean? That's slow, but it works. That's the thing. It's frustrating, it's aggravating, it drives people crazy. Not a lot of people participate in it, but you know what? It does work. And genuinely, it gets people's thoughts across. It just does it at a snail's pace. Take that as opposed to a monarchy where someone has absolute power and can do whatever they want and doesn't really represent people's interests. You know what I'm saying? You can have a king like Louis who says, I'm just going to party all the time. Who has absolutely no interest in the common good of the common people. Or you can have somebody who, like Joseph II, we'll talk about him, genuinely wants the best for his people. It's a crapshoot who you're going to get. In a democracy, at least, you take all that and disseminate it amongst everybody else who votes. It's a broken system that's broken with purpose, if that makes any sense. So that's how the Enlightenment is. So the Enlightenment has all these different principles that Catherine's going to run with. One of the main ones is the idea of natural rights. What natural rights do you have? Are you born with? No one can take them away from you legally. No. That's not what freedom of speech means.
Well, you say whatever you want, and I'm pretty sure you know what's going on.
Well, let's argue that for a second, then we'll get back to my original point. Do you have the right to say anything you want in this country?
Yes. Yeah, you can say you have consequences, though.
No, if I start yelling fire in enclosed space and try to cause a panic, I'm going to get arrested. Yeah, I mean, hypothetically, yeah, I could say that same thing. I can kill anyone in the world I want. I'm probably going to go to jail. That's not a right, though. Not one that is given. See, this is where we can get to the semantics of things. See, one of the principal ideas of a government is we give away certain rights because we want protection of government. We are not 100% free in the United States, but we give away rights we don't think we really need, i.e. the right to kill anybody we want. You know what I'm saying? Consider this. If there's no government at all, you have as many rights as you want. That means so does everybody else. So the only thing that you have protecting you is yourself. Think the American Wild West. Why did everyone go around carrying a gun? Protection, because there's no police. I mean, there are in some cases, but it's like there's not near enough police force. It's utter anarchy. And if you don't protect yourself, someone's going to take advantage of you. Okay, so that's total freedom. So not going to be rules or restrictions. So we give away certain rules because we want to protect ourselves. I should not be allowed to get on fire and try to cause a panic because I'm going to hurt people, yes? So that's not really protected speech. In fact, what's interesting, as you were pointing out a second ago, you don't have the right necessarily, I mean, you have the right to say whatever you want to some extent, but you're not free from consequences. You know what I mean? Like, the freedom of speech exists in our government to keep the government from censoring you. So, like, I can say, you know, whatever I want about the government, and like police are going to bash down my door with flashbangs and come take me away to never be seen again, which happens in some countries. You know, I have that right. But like, if I start telling someone, man, your baby's ugly, and they punch me, you know, of course they're not guilty of assault, because, you know, just because someone says something doesn't mean you have to be upset by it either. But the point is that just because you want to say something and mouth off doesn't mean that you're free from any other consequences. What's really interesting is, like, let's analyze the Westboro Baptist Church, where they picket funerals and things like that. There have been attempts by people to have them labeled as a hate group, like the Ku Klux Klan. And basically, if that occurs, then some of the things they say are no longer protected speech because it's intentional to start a riot. And the only way that can go is if someone starts a riot. So basically, put it this way: if the Westboro Baptist Church started picketing funerals and there was a riot and violence and things like that, they would be banned as well. It's just people's actions. Again, it's slow, but it works. You know what I mean? But the three general natural rights we assume everybody has is life, liberty, and what's the third one? You guys know? It's not, by the way, the pursuit of happiness, because that's not anything. Pursuit of happiness, what does that mean? You know, that's really vague, isn't it? It's actually life, liberty, pursuit of property, or the protection to own property. Because in a lot of cases, countries go like, yeah, I know you own this land, I'm taking it from you. It's the country's land, not really yours. You can't own it, it's the country's. Just take the land, do whatever they want with it. We can't really do that in the United States. There are exceptions to that, and eminent domain is a scary, scary thing. But other than that, that's right to property. And by the way, you can actually sign your rights away, too. Which is kind of interesting. Well, for instance, there's a thing called homeowners association, where like basically a bunch of homeowners say like, okay, we want to all follow certain rules to protect our land value. We don't want somebody to like, you know, take their house and paint it all like neon colors and make people not want to move here, which drives the price of our property down. So basically everyone has to have the same paint colors, things like that. Makes sense, right? Here's the problem. By signing that, there has to be bites to that. Like, saying, okay, I'm not going to do that, fair enough, what do you do to anyways? What do they need to do? In the case of homeowners association, they can sell your house in under. So it takes away your right to property. But you have to sign that agreement giving away your right to do it. So basically people are willing to do that to get the benefits. Again, this is called the social contract. Anytime you sign away a right because you say, well, it's better than the alternative, that's part of the social contract that all governments have by the very existence. I realize this is kind of like, what is it going to do? We will cover this more later, but this is important to understand when we talk about Catherine, because she is ostensibly an enlightened despot. She's going to do all these wonderful things. To some extent, she does. For instance, she's going to do some really great things for Russia, like make the education system better. But on the other hand, she's going to do some pretty awful things. She really, really strengthens serfdom in Russia, and that's going to be a big problem for Russia throughout the 19th century, because the rest of Europe undergoes the Industrial Revolution. They start replacing workers with machines. You guys want to know why slavery stopped existing in the Western world? Because of machines, right? Slave labor was less efficient than machines. Had nothing to do with how wrong it was to own people, things like that. You guys watch Amazing Grace, the movie. They talk about that. They go through the whole detail. It's like in order to stop slavery. This guy's making this with passion speaks. Like, who cares? Well, it'll save you money. Oh, do tell. Because people are economic creatures. And that's as sad as it really is, but it's true. That's what does away with it. It has nothing to do with like feeling the morality of things. That's just kind of humbling in a way to think that, man, like the best we have ever been, the things we've tried to end, the horrible things like that, it's usually motivated by economics. That's kind of disquieting, I think. But anyway, so like I said, she does three major things. First, she improves education, which is significant because with an educated populace, you can do more. You don't want your population dumb, unless you're just trying to rule over people through fear. Then, yeah, you want dumb people because you just want them to kind of obey you and not fight back. Look at what ISIS has done anytime they've taken over an area. Have you noticed that in Syria, what they do? They ban any education except for religious indoctrination. It's not even teaching religion, because if you actually pay attention to the religion, nothing they do is okay. So they basically copy and paste what they want and have certain interpretations to brainwash the people. That's what they do, because that's how they want to operate. If anyone actually thinks, they're undone. So education is important. 2, codifies the law, makes it make sense. Makes it so it's the same throughout the entire country. 3rd, organizes the provincial governments. This is important. Do you guys understand the difference between a federal and local government? Okay, federal government has to do with the government as a whole, basically the top-down approach. The government, in the case of the United States government, it supersedes every other law that a state can pass. States run themselves, more or less. It's local government. And that's actually very important, because without local government, individual needs are not met. Think about it this way. What would be more effective? Somebody who was a government official that lived as your next door neighbor and knew all the problems you had to deal with and tried to see them resolved, or somebody living in Washington, D.C. trying to tell you what your problems are? Right. So local government has a very important purpose to help you navigate affairs from place to place. But you also need federal government, bigger government, that oversees the entire country. The differences between states, for instance. Making agreements, say, between Indiana and Kentucky about who's paying for the bridge. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, we're splitting it, but like, is it 60-40, 50-50, how are we doing it? And basically, whenever there's not an agreement, the federal government comes and says, okay, this is what we're doing. So basically, anytime the federal government says this is the law, it's the law of the entire country. In the case of the state saying this is the law, it only affects that state. Does that make sense? And actually, it even gets smaller. It's sort of like a fractal. You know what I mean? Like where you have the different designs, they kind of spread out, get more and more and more and more and more. You know what I'm talking about? Fractals? It looks like that. So anyways, so she does all these different things. Provincial government, very important. Catherine does get a one-on-one report from the audience. And she also successfully partitions Poland. Partitioning is dividing, breaking it up into smaller chunks. So Poland was weak. And Austria, Prussia, and Russia were all considering taking it over. But the problem is they would probably have to fight each other for who was going to take Poland. And that could actually mean that Poland could fend off these different forces, sort of this divide and conquer method. So they actually met together. Catherine, Frederick Wilhelm II, and I think it was Maria Theresa. And they all agreed that we are going to divide up Poland. And so they did 3 different times, 1772, 1793, and 1795. By 1795, Poland as a country ceased to exist. It's not going to exist basically until the 20th century. Okay? Any questions? Like I said, we'll get more into the Enlightenment laws and things like that here later. But it's fascinating when you get right down to it, because we often assume that we have these basic rights, but we really don't have them through a direct means. Because again, if you look at the Constitution of the United States, it sets out certain laws and principles of running government, but it doesn't actually ever say what you have the right to. So they had to make an additional set of laws, the Bill of Rights, explaining that these are the rights you have, and then those have been expanded upon. The Constitution, though, ostensibly is the supreme law of the land. That's why the Supreme Court has to decide whether laws are actually fitting within the framework of the Constitution or not. Because if it doesn't, it's unconstitutional and cannot be a law. So then the only option that someone has to make the law pass is to physically change the Constitution, which can happen, has happened in the past. So anyways, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, the flavor of and things like that. But anyway, any questions, comments, concerns? Is it getting too chilly for you guys?